right, thank you guys so much for taking the time to speak with me. So today we have Megan and Ricky, and we have Chris and Carrie. These are two Snowflakes adoptive families who have dealt with male factor infertility. And so they've come to the Snowflakes program. They've been successful and have been able to grow their family through the Snowflakes program. We know that male factor infertility can be a difficult subject that not a lot of people talk about. So we wanted to make this resource video as a helpful tool to others who may be wondering where to go next in their journey and who just need some extra encouragement and support. So thank you guys so much again for speaking with us. And I will let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. And we can start with Megan and Ricky. Just tell us a little bit about you guys, a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so my name is Ricky. This is my wife, Megan, and we have our almost 6-month-old Copeland. We live here in central Oklahoma. We just moved up here from Texas. You want to share anything? Or?
Yeah, we've been married for almost 11 years and always knew that we wanted to have kids just early on, even in our dating relationship. That was super important to us. And funny enough, we had even talked about adoption, but we just never could have predicted it would have gone this particular route and this kind of adoption. But I don't think it's coincidence that like just the topic of adoption was on the table for us. It kind of softened our hearts to that idea, long before we would even need it. But yeah, we always wanted kids, always wanted to be parents, and found ourselves, coming to Snowflakes through a very twisty road. But yeah, we're just so thankful that things ended up the way that they did. We have our miracle boy, and we always say, like, we wish we didn't have to go through everything that we did to get here, but also looking at our son, it's just like, it is the sweetest reward for everything we've had to go through. And, we would do it all again, for him, to have him.
That's beautiful. I love that. Chris and Carrie?
So, hi, I'm Chris. This is Carrie. We've been married about the same amount of time as you guys, Megan and Ricky. And we live just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. Carrie grew up in this area. I kind of grew up all over the place in a military family. And yeah, a lot like what you were sharing, we did not see this coming. We always thought that we would be parents. And with the diagnosis of male factor infertility, it just really threw us for a loop. Anything you wanted to share?
Just that I really desired to be pregnant. And so this was a really, really good solution to that for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. So take us through a little bit of your infertility journey and a little bit about how you got to the diagnosis of male factor infertility.
We had, I think, just been trying, normally, like everyone does. You just go into it thinking it's just going to be no big deal, and it might take a little bit of time, but nothing crazy. And about 2 years went by, and we just kept hearing like, oh, you're just stressed. And it was a lot of the focus was on me. It was like I was getting tested for things, and people were saying, oh, I'm just stressed and I just need to let go, and like it'll just happen, or I need to get this checked in my blood or whatever. And then after about probably 2 years went by, or maybe even less than that, I don't remember exactly what prompted us, but you went to a urologist, and that's fine. That was when he finally got tested, and it was not a fertility clinic of any kind. It was just strictly a urologist. So there was no, sensitivity in regards to fertility. He was just like, you have no sperm and you can't have kids, and so you might want to go see a specialist. And we were just like, excuse me?
Yeah, it was very very blunt.
Yeah.
And at the time felt very unhelpful. Felt like you were just being kind of tossed around between specialists at that point. I was like, okay, well, there's a problem, but you can't fix it. And you can't even really tell me what's going on, but you just know something's wrong. So I have to go over here. And then was that before? This was all before Austin. So we
did a lot of moving around in there, but long story short, just kind of saw specialist after specialist, procedure after procedure, medication after medication, and we couldn't even get to the point where there was enough sperm to work with to do like IVF in the traditional sense, where, you know, we would take my egg, his sperm, like that wasn't even going to be an option because we couldn't get, and we would get just a little tiny bit, but it wasn't enough to go forward with the IVF because you need even a pretty good amount even to do that, just because of the probability being so small that, you know, IVF even works.
I think the hardest part of it, for me at least, the hardest part of the diagnosis wasn't necessarily just having confirmation that yes, I'm infertile, but hearing that it was an unexplained genetic disorder. So having gone through all the tests to kind of narrow down the list of what could be causing the infertility, you get to the very end, the last possible, you know, solution, not solution, but answer, which is, we don't know, but we know it's genetic. And I was like, all right, cool. So there's no fix that we know of at this point. Yeah. That was probably the hardest part. And that was a pretty dark day. It's kind of like tattooed into my brain. I remember exactly where I was. I remember what the weather was like. I remember the lighting shifted. It was weird. But I remember where I was when I got that kind of final report from the fertility specialist, basically saying it's confirmed that it's an unexplained genetic disorder, and
there's
don't
nothing
see a path
else we
that
can
do at this point. There's just too few sperm to work with, and they're not viable. So yeah, that was kind of where we left off at that
before
point.
We found Snowflakes. That was kind of our stopping point.
Wow, that's crazy that you can like remember everything so vividly. I imagine it was a very life-changing day, and very interesting that they just kind of tossed you around and were like, well, we don't really know what to do. That's wow.
It was a lot for sure.
For sure. Chris and Carrie, you want to share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, it sounds like our journey has a lot of similarities to yours. We got married, and I always imagined we would have kids right away. I imagined myself as a really young mom, and we started trying about 6 months into being married. And after the first month, I was just so shocked and confused. Like, how in the world, I don't understand why we're not pregnant. And then the second month goes by. I'm like, I'm just kind of at a loss. And then it started to get really sad. And I reached out to my OB, who at the time, we're just really thankful looking back that he was willing to start working with us about 6 months into trying, because that is not really the case with a lot of OBs. They have you wait at least a year, and started doing some initial testing on me, all of which came back what they assumed was normal. And the guy said, well, while we're at it, let's just do a semen analysis on your husband. And so really looking back, I feel so grateful that he had the thought to go ahead and do that right away. And I got a phone call at work at my desk with the nurse telling me the results of the semen analysis. And she gave me the number, which was 6. And I was like, oh, thanks. That sounds bad. And
I think ours was 7. Yeah. So it's like a shocking number. That single digit is like
what? You're not supposed to be able to count them.
Yeah,
I remember saying 7 million. Yes, exactly. And she goes, no, 7. We're like,
yeah. I Googled how many sperm are you supposed to have, and I called them back and I said, I'm so sorry. I think I must have misunderstood the nurse, because I missed the unit. Is it 1,000, 100,000? They're like, no, it was 6. We could count them.
Wow.
And And I think in that initial sample, one was moving. And so we got hooked up with essentially like a traveling male fertility doctor that was in Cincinnati one day out of the whole month, didn't take insurance.
He wrote a book about male factor infertility, and he's in this area. He's the guy. And we went to the guy, and he told me to do some stuff and come back in a few weeks. We did a few months.
Yeah.
We did all the stuff and came back, and it was worse.
Yeah. Well, you had 7, but none
of them were
moving. And so at that meeting, he told us, like, you don't, IVF isn't an option. IVF with ICSI isn't an option. Here's a brochure for traditional adoption. And similarly to the two of you, Megan and Ricky, we had talked about adopting, but it was always through the lens of after we had our own children first, our own biological children. And so for someone who really desired to be pregnant and experience all of that, that just felt so cruel to be handed a brochure and just kind of like, well, that's my bag of tricks. We can't do anything else. So we were really at a loss of how to move forward and what to do.
And just to chime in from my perspective of all of this, similar to what you all had shared, and I imagine this is the case for many couples who might be watching this at some point, the natural assumption or the cultural assumption is that it's on the female's end. That flow chart begins. That's where all the testing begins, all of the attention, and the expectation is we'll find something wrong on her end, and then we'll fix that thing or we'll address that thing, and then we'll just keep on going. It is humbling, and humbling in a couple of ways. The diagnosis is humbling, and then it's also humbling to think, oh, it never even crossed my mind. How sort of not boneheaded, but like, oh, that was such a simplistic way of looking at it, that, oh, obviously it wasn't me, it must have been her. So that's humbling to realize how wrong I was. And to this day, knowing this was something my spouse deeply desired, it feels like this is something I inflicted. This is something that I brought to this relationship. I didn't do it on purpose, but like, them's the cards. I am the one who actually brought this in.
Yeah.
Everybody would have expected it would have been on her end, but no, shock. It was me.
Yeah. And again, that's so interesting that they were doing all of the testing and are looking to do all the testing on the woman. And then when it is the man, it's like, oh, well, here's your brochure. Like, there's nothing we can do. Like, that's, wow. That's very eye-opening.
Female infertility is so much. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, when we talked with our specialist, and similarly to you guys, we asked what could cause something like this. And he essentially said, I know that I'm a specialist in this, but this is not a huge field. There's not a lot of science. There's not a lot of research. Probably more male factor infertility cases happen than are reported or even acknowledged. And so the science and the medicine is just really limited here. Maybe when you were a kid, you were exposed on a vacation to something. Maybe there was a pesticide in your neighborhood. Maybe you were born this way. We just don't know.
Wow.
It was the weird feeling of like, I've failed my entire life and I didn't even know it. And now I do, and I don't have any tools to fix it, right? There is no ointment or pill or shot that you can take necessarily for this, specifically the type of male factor infertility we experience. That feeling of like, I imagine a lot of men naturally want to fix things. It's just kind of the default mode that we operate in. And to be faced with something that is not only quote unquote your fault, but you can't fix it. There's nothing to do with it. Is very humbling. It sucked, but it's very, very humbling as well. I completely agree with that. It was like, oh, I am at the mercy of all of it, and I just have to avail myself to something beyond me to make this dream come true.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
Was there something you wanted to add to, Megan?
No, I'm good. It was kind of said. It's all good.
Okay, you're good. So male factor infertility, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, it can be a taboo subject. Not a lot of men want to talk about it. Not a lot of couples want to talk about it. It can be uncomfortable, which is, again, while we're very thankful that you guys are willing to make this resource video for us and with us. So how did this diagnosis impact you? I know you talked about it a little bit, but how did it impact your relationship? How did it, impact you?
Well, I mean, I would say, I hope that I'm not wrong, but I feel like it brought us closer together relationally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it was obviously difficult. It's still difficult to think about, even though we're past the point of having to navigate it necessarily day to day. It still comes to mind, but definitely brought us closer together relationally, especially as we moved out of working with our fertility specialist and started to close that particular chapter as we eventually then obviously did Snowflakes. But personally, I would say it affected me more spiritually than anything else. I mean, obviously emotionally, but spiritually was probably the most potent area of my life that it affected me. I felt, especially in that particular season, it certainly softened for me as we've been able to have our son Copeland. But I felt abandoned by God in that particular area, especially for me, hearing that it was a unexplained genetic disorder. It's like, okay, I was designed this way. Like I came out of the womb this way. It wasn't something that happened to me as a kid where I got injured and that explains what happened. This was something more elemental. That was still is very hard to wrap my mind around. So that I would say that was probably for any men out there who, even if they're not necessarily religious, who might watch this resource, I would just want them to know that it is okay to feel that and to reckon with it, because it's not an untrue or invalid sensation to feel that sense of loss, because you have lost out on something, and you didn't even know that you didn't have it. But yeah, that was probably the most potent area of my life that I felt that diagnosis.
Yeah. What about for you, Chris and Carrie?
Thanks for sharing, man. I can relate to that a lot. I am in ministry. That's my job. And it was not something I was interested in to find a cheap faith to get me through this. I didn't want to read flowery books that had proverbs and kind of abstract Bible verses plucked out of context saying that like maybe things will get better someday. I wanted to sit like Job. I wanted to read Ecclesiastes. I wanted to confront the abyss and just say, I am suffering and this is terrible. Why, God? Is this a very cruel joke? Also, we both work with kids. At the time, Carrie was a teacher for kids who have cancer and are in long-term stays at the hospital, just working with kids every day. My area of specialty within ministry is working with children. So how is this part of the plan? Is this a mistake? Is it a joke? What is this? And yes, you're right. It's okay to feel those things. It's okay to voice them. Absolutely in prayer. What I had to learn was to find ways to voice it with trusted people. Because it was so deeply personal and something that was sort of like this new presence in our marriage. It wasn't something that I could always go to Carrie and dump. So that looked like finding a counselor. That looked like finding people at work in our friend network who could just grab a beer and listen for a while, because the alternative was just a profound sense of depression and maybe even worse, isolation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That this does not affect that many men. It is an awkward thing to talk about. Therefore, there are no people I can talk to about it.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I appreciate you emphasizing that aspect of it. Of it is so easy to retreat, and especially internally retreat. And while there is certainly a space for that sometimes, where you just need to kind of just be by yourself and kind of sit there, if left unchecked and done too often, it can certainly lead to unhealthy decisions or thoughts or whatever. So yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that, because it's so important. And I very much experienced that through close friends, family, who were able to just listen, and that was the big thing, is finding people who are able to listen without having to offer a response or a solution or a Bible verse. It's just like they can just sit there and listen and let you kind of voice it and validate the emotions, validate the experience, even if they're not necessarily able to relate to it on their personal level. Finding people who can authentically hear you is very, very important, and certainly very helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for sharing that. I know that can be a very personal impact, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. So, with men being taught, it feels like in today's society, you're taught what emotions are and aren't okay to feel, because, you have to be a man and you have to be strong and all that kind of stuff. So in the midst of that, and I know you touched on it a little bit, but like, what was your primary go-to emotion?
I would say initially anger at the situation, which then sort of evolved into sort of like an emo acceptance of it. It's like, yeah, it is what it is, and it sucks, but whatever. Just kind of shrugging the shoulders, kind of melancholy, and then I would say the further that the time that has passed since that initial diagnosis, and obviously our journey with Snowflakes in particular, certainly eased those kind of dark, depressive, sad emotions. But yeah, I mean, just kind of melancholy is kind of the mood for much of that season, for me at least. I would say that anger was probably, for me, the more I keep coming out the word potent. Potent was just the word, but like anger was kind of the one emotion that, when it arose, was the most visceral for me. Just anger at the situation, anger at God at times, anger even toward myself, of like, why did you let this happen? Why couldn't you have thought of this before? Why didn't you go do the test first? And whatever. So yeah, melancholy, anger at times.
And I think in more private moments, like just between the two of us, you know, there were tears, there were moments of just total breakdown because, yeah, I feel like the melancholy or anger or just even kind of shrugging acceptance was maybe a coping thing sometimes. Because I hear sometimes people say, like, it's easier to be mad than sad. Like, if you're mad, maybe you won't cry because, like, you don't want to cry. But there were moments where just the weight of it would just really sit heavy on each of us, and we both would just need to, like, just let it out. But there were very few people, they're very important people to us that are still so close to us in our lives, but very few people who we could really just let out the feelings with, him especially, because like you said, it is more taboo, not because it's uncommon, but just because people don't want to talk about it and acknowledge how very real it is. So
Would you say that you agree with that, Chris?
Yes. I think I felt more sadness than anger. Certainly anger was there, but the bottom of it all was just a profound, draining sadness. It is exhausting to be sad. You just don't have energy to, like, go get ice cream or do something that might spark some joy or whatever.
yeah.
Set a goal, you know. It's so draining. It's so sad. I think the other emotion is a really deep confusion. Like, have I completely misunderstood what I'm here for? Have I completely missed the boat on something? Did I do something wrong? A lot of self-doubt, just a lot of confusion.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So we often hear from couples who have experienced male factor infertility that, kind of like you were saying a little bit earlier, Ricky, like you feel like you have to fix things, but you also feel like you have to be strong for your wife. You have to support her in those moments. And, you know, just really be with her and there for her in the midst of her grief. So did that ever cause you to feel like you couldn't properly grieve the diagnosis because you felt this way or because you felt like it was unmanly?
No, I never, I wouldn't say I ever felt that. I feel fortunate that our marriage and even before we got married, our dating relationship was always very strong on the level of communication. So when in this journey, when I was grieving, she was always grieving with me and vice versa. Never, I don't think one of us was ever just grieving alone in that regard. But I will kind of, maybe it's a tangent, but I think it's related, which is that the diagnosis and the journey that we walked has certainly reframed my understanding of masculinity. And so in that particular season of our journey, really was eye-opening to me of just things in my life of, like, you know, I do need to be more open about what I'm navigating in life, regardless if it's bad, or, you know, just be vulnerable with people. Because now I'm seeing what happens in a truly dark season of my life when I don't express these emotions or these questions or these confusions or doubts, whatever it might be. And so, I think being a man is being strong enough to admit that you don't have the answer, you don't have the tools to fix it, you don't know how to find the answers or the tools to fix it, and that you need help. I certainly needed help in that season of my life. Found it through counseling, found it through friends, found it through family, church, work, even to an extent. You know, there are a lot of resources that I pulled on, but I think that was probably the one very eye-opening reframing that I experienced regarding masculinity was, no, actually strength isn't stuffing it down or hiding it or just putting on the display. It's actually saying, I need help. I don't know what to do with these things. And that's strength. Strength is being vulnerable, explicitly vulnerable with those you trust. Obviously not just everyone, but yeah.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that's really well said.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Chris, did you feel like you couldn't grieve because you had to be strong for Carrie and felt like it wasn't manly?
It's an interesting question. I do think that there's a category in I don't know, culture for something called manly grief, but it wasn't the kind of thing that I felt like doing. Like I didn't walk around the house like I'm gonna punch a hole in the drywall or like
Right.
I'm gonna
So glad you didn't.
I'm gonna buy a car and like learn how to fix it, or something like it wasn't it wasn't those sort of stereotypical things. Nothing you could put in a montage about a man grieving, what I did do, because this is just how I'm wired, I compartmentalized the heck out of it. I just thought like, well, I'll just make sure that stays in the box that's called family and home. And I will just, when I'm at work, I will just do the work things. And then when I come home, I will try to have a reserve of energy to sit in the pain, to sit with whatever Carrie's experiencing. It is true that part of true masculinity is learning to admit your limits and to ask for help. We have 2 young boys. Right now they're 4 years old and 7 years old. And when they reach the limit of something they're able to do, it is so frustrating to them. So frustrating. And if they ask for help, I don't always remember to do this, but I do try to thank them for asking for help. That is part of what it means to mature and to grow up and to be comfortable in your own skin, to be able to admit that and look for it. Any thoughts on manly grief?
I mean, did you feel like you didn't get to fully grieve because you were supporting me through that?
I definitely felt most days like it was more debilitating for you. But I don't know if I thought of that as a gendered thing. I thought of that as I compartmentalize very quickly and easily. And I know that that's not the way that you experience the world.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I do think in a lot of ways, emotionally, it was your diagnosis, but the way it played out then was like the treatment on my body because of that. And so although I know you were grieving, but ultimately there was nothing to be done.
It still was a tangible physical reality for you.
Fell to me in the solution of that. And I do think in a lot of ways, the emotions that went into the diagnosis, at least in our case, weighed more heavily on me. And I was left feeling extremely blindsided and like utterly heartbroken. Yeah, in a lot of ways. But I do feel like we met each other in that grief.
I remember feeling like I wish that there were a way I could solve it for you. Yeah. Sorry, this is not couples counsel.
That's okay. That is okay. You're bringing up some really good points and some really good and helpful tidbits. So I thank you guys a lot for sharing. And I definitely agree that masculinity really needs to be reframed. And so I love what you're doing with your sons and thanking them whenever they ask for help. And I think that's a fantastic place to start. So I really like that a lot. So we talked about it just a little bit, but in the times when you felt like you couldn't properly grieve and you were just stuffing it down, what ramifications did you see from stuffing it down and not letting yourself just have your emo phase and just sitting there and like, I just need to be sad?
Well, for me, that's where the anger turned into the wrong kind of anger. The self-destructive, to an extent, anger, just it just easily lent itself to, coping mechanisms that were not healthy, letting your mind go down rabbit holes that it doesn't need to go down. And through all of those things just ended up increasing the emotional distance between myself and others, mainly her, but friends, family, coworkers, to an extent. Everyone is different in that relation. But
there were times too where he hadn't been continually open with me about how he was feeling about things, and we admittedly took a really, really long time to, like, we had the diagnosis in 2017.
The first one from the urologist. Yeah.
Yes. And we just had our son 5 months ago. So it took us a long time to be ready to take certain steps. And a lot of that sometimes was due to like me being like, okay, I've been researching and I want to go, see this specialist or try this thing. And he was like, I'm not ready to go down that road yet, or I'm not ready to confront that thing yet. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't you tell me? Like, why haven't you been? I've been really open with you about how I'm feeling and what I'm ready to start digging into. And he would just shut down and not always be forthcoming about the feelings he was wrestling with. So then that would mean prolonging even more, because our thing was, we don't want to move forward till we're both on the same page. I don't want to drag you to an appointment and get you poked and prodded more and see what other options we have. Like, we need to be unified in this, because it's hard enough, just all the things we're going through are hard enough. We have to be a team. So it was that coping, the stuffing down that would also end up prolonging the journey for us, because we needed to both be on the same page. Even though our feelings might be different, we had to both process through them and be ready to take the next step together.
For sure. What about for you guys, Chris and Carrie?
I can relate to the isolation. The unhealthy side of sadness for me turned into jealousy and resentment of friends who were getting pregnant accidentally, seemingly.
Times that seeing announcements of pregnancies was like, oh, right, whatever, sure. Or, feeling jealous. Yeah, can absolutely relate to that.
Yeah. And I think that was partly from not giving some of those feelings a voice. I think some of it was just a natural response that anybody might feel if you see your friends, your neighbors, your family moving on in stages of life that you always assumed you would be doing together with them. You feel left out and abandoned and left behind. And it's the easiest trick in the world to go, well, they're the problem in my life,
Yeah, for sure. So this question is for Megan and Carrie. And I know that Megan touched on it just a little bit and Carrie did too, but how did this diagnosis impact your relationship with your husband, and how did you support him through this?
I think it really, this sounds cheesy, but it really is true. It ultimately showed me how much he loves me, because I saw how much it killed him to not be able to give me this thing I had always dreamt of, which was being a mom. And I just remember thinking so many times, like, wow, you literally would do anything to make this happen for me, and you can't. And it just made me realize, like, just how much he loves me and how much he wants to be able to give this to me. And so for me, I was like, I had to really go to the Lord a lot and trusted people in my life to process things with, not hiding it from him, but I was like, you're already feeling all the feels. What good would it do for me to, I don't want to ever make you feel worse. I want to process and be honest with him, but I also want to be cautious not to inflict any more, unnecessary shame or guilt or anger or sadness. Like I really, I feel confident that I processed things the way I needed to, but was careful about how I would voice that to him. And it's not like he didn't know, he knows how much I wanted to be pregnant, and I had that desire to have that whole experience of pregnancy and childbirth and everything. So it just gave me a greater sense of how much he loves me and how much he would just do anything for us. But it really just made me, I'm so sorry. What was the second half of the question?
No, it's okay.
I can feel myself starting to go on a tangent, and I'm like, I want to answer it clearly.
That's okay. And you were touching on it, but how did you support your husband through it?
Mm-hmm. I think just listening, like being a listening ear for him and giving him space to be angry and process. And even sometimes those emotions maybe intimidated me a little bit, because we both grew up in Christian homes and in church. And so when he would go through kind of that doubting and that feeling abandoned by God, I would kind of get nervous and be like, oh gosh, is this gonna just totally shatter your entire faith, and you're just gonna walk away from it all, and this will change everything forever? And I had to really go to the Lord and be like, God, will you meet him there? Because you have to feel what you're gonna feel. I can't tell him you don't feel that way. I had to really let him feel those things and trust the Lord to guide him through that, because the last thing he needed was for me to like nag him to trust God more. That wasn't going to be helpful. So I had to go to the Lord and trust the Lord with him and with his feelings and the things he was processing. But yeah, just listening and nights where we were just, maybe we had been home every single night that week and we just both were struggling. It's like, let's get out, let's go on a walk, let's go, to the brewery, or let's go hang out with so-and-so. Like, let's just get out of this kind of heavy bubble that we've been sitting under this week. Maybe it was, the week of a rough appointment where we got more bad news, or another semen analysis that showed more negative results. It was just like, we need to get out. We need to let ourselves feel things, but also we've got to get out from the bubble and not just sit under this heaviness for too long.
Touching grass is important.
Yes, go touch grass is a real thing.
It really is, for sure. I love that you went to the Lord on his behalf also. I think that's a great way of support. That's really cool. What about for you, Carrie? How did it affect your relationship with Chris, and how did you find yourself supporting him?
Megan, I can totally track with you, finding ways to almost be a little bit protective, and being cautious of using language that implies blame, because obviously this wasn't something Chris chose. Like he didn't want that for us. And so I think in a lot of the ways to answer the question about how to support him was finding ways to talk about it that didn't use like the word fault, because it's hard to come up with any other language, because I'm not saying it's your fault. It's not your fault, but we use that like, oh, it's Chris's fault we can't have kids, or this it. So finding out ways to talk about it in a way that didn't add to that sense of like guilt or shame or blame or you did this to me, like those kinds of things, to speak about it more neutrally and just state like, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do about it, and being really careful to not add any more of that burden to Chris. And I think about impacting our relationship, it is so isolating. And we didn't know anybody who was going through anything like this. A few friends that had experienced infertility on the female side of things, but we didn't know anybody who had experienced male factor infertility. And so there was very little comfort to be found even within our friend group, because it still felt like, but you can't relate to what we're going through. So I think for our relationship, it caused us to draw closer to one another there, because we were the only ones that could relate to it. Yeah. Nobody else in our community or our circle knew what we were going through except for the two of us. And since then, that has changed, and we have found other people that can relate to it now, for better or worse, right? But it did certainly there in the beginning really draw us closer together.
I think that's great that it was able to draw you both closer to each other. I think there's some, like, it's bad circumstances, but I think it's sweet that you were able to draw closer together. So Chris and Ricky, did you have a moment, like, was there one particular moment when you really acknowledged and validated your own feelings about this, or was it just kind of more like a process?
For me, it was definitely more of a process. There were things that I did during that time. I kept a journal for a lot of those years, and that was a safe place for me to do that. But I kind of wish that I had a Rocky charging up the stairs moment where, like, things changed after that or something. But it honestly still is something that I'm working through.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. It was and still is a process. Certainly defining moments along the way that I could point to. I remember I worked for a small private university, and I remember giving a devotion at one of the staff chapels they were doing, and told our story I told some of my coworkers privately, but this was the first time I kind of told a wider audience at my work about our journey, and I did it in a kind of creative way. And that was one of the first moments of feeling like I'm okay saying that I'm infertile. Why should that be weird? Like, I mean, it's a diagnosis. It's like saying that you have anything else. And so that was one particular moment of where I felt that I was able to just move out of just feeling sad about it and into some place of acceptance. But it's certainly been a process, and it's still ongoing. I mean, one thing I have found that's been interesting about the process and the journey has been the way that it not only reframes like masculinity or your own identity, but your past too. So it's almost like a new prism to look backwards through, and kind of not use it to only make sense of the past, but it's one piece among many that kind of bring other strands of your life together, and help reconcile pieces of your identity that you've just never quite been able to figure out or put into words. This has been a particular aspect of that has been helpful, but it's absolutely, yeah, it's been a process, and I'm sure to an extent it'll be a lifelong process of making sense of it and accepting it.
Yeah, for sure. So, how did you nurture your relationship with each other? And how are you still nurturing it? Like as you continue to go through this process, as you continue to cope with it?
Chris, why don't you go first if you want?
How about you?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in. So we have some friends that we met through Snowflakes, actually, that we get together with, and that has certainly helped, I think, moving forward.
We met at a Snowflakes picnic.
Snowflakes picnic.
Oh,
We
whoa!
went
First
and it
one we
rained,
went to.
and so almost nobody came. And so there was the Snowflake staff, a ton of Chick-fil-A, and these two families.
Yeah.
That's
So I
hilarious.
feel like that has been a really good way to cope through all of this, is meeting other couples that are building their family this way. That feels like its own form of self-care. We actually now go on like family vacations with this family, and has been a really great thing for this infertility diagnosis and this unique way to build a family. But then also just between the two of us, continuing to see a counselor, because things still come up. I mean, we still have things that are lingering, hurts and feelings of sadness and grief that don't go away when you have built your family. Our boys are 7 and 4, and I'm still feeling that sadness. And so we still check in with our counselor from time to time to help with those feelings, and coping through that.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add is that we found a lot of freedom with one another in dark humor.
Yep.
We
Amen.
just make some room for that. We found, I don't even know if it's still up. There was a podcast done by a pair of journalists who experienced some similar stuff, and they called their podcast IVFML. And
Amazing.
what a joy.
Yeah.
What a joy
Yeah,
to
find,
just
like,
vicariously hear
laugh a
somebody
little
else's
bit.
pain. Yeah.
Just like when you meet somebody that also experienced infertility, of like you go through your baseball card of how many transfers did you do? What kind of infertility do you have? And yeah, that has helped to find some humor in the sadness.
It's I don't know if I'd call it a fun way to be vulnerable, but it takes some of the edge off of the awkwardness and stuff to just find funny ways to put things and stuff.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it brings a new emotion to the table. So, there you go.
Yeah.
Dark humor is definitely our brand. That has gotten us through a lot. But yeah, it's tempting to just, well, not really tempting, but people might look at our story and be like, oh, you have your son, so it's all good now, right? But especially for us, he was our last embryo. We had several failed transfers and a miscarriage before him, and so he's our last, and as far as we can see, our only, and so that brings up a different level of grief, and we have to be honest when we're feeling those things too. And we might have kids another way. We might do traditional adoption someday, or foster care. Like, I have no idea. But right now we're just, what we say to each other is like, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we're going to enjoy our son right now because we went through so much to have him. And right now we're just focused on enjoying him. And that's just kind of something we say to ourselves, not like trying to convince ourselves that it's true, but just a reminder of like, we don't have to figure all that out right now. We're just going to enjoy this time, our little family that we dreamt of and prayed for and hoped for so long. And we don't want to rush that by thinking about, well, how are we going to have more kids if we want more kids? Like how we're nurturing our relationship right now is just enjoying our son and just doing the things that we always dreamt of doing with him, and kind of cross that bridge when we get there. If we get there, like the Lord might do a work in our hearts where like we have our son and that's the only child that we have. And if that's, what the Lord has for us, I know that he'll do a work in our hearts where we can accept that. And in the meantime, we're just going to enjoy our son, enjoy this gift that we wanted so badly, and not try to rush it away or think about the next thing.
Yeah. I think that's a good perspective, especially because I feel like people can get in the mindset, even if outside of the realm of infertility, of like, okay, well, I have this, let's like look to the next thing. So I think that's a good reminder to be like, let's just enjoy. We're in the middle of what we prayed for so hard. So let's just enjoy being that. I think that's a really good reminder. But just a couple more questions here for you guys. So, as we all know, we have maybe family members, friends who they feel like they have the answers to everything and they mean so well, but their comments can come across as very hurtful, and, just unhelpful. So in the midst of facing those comments, how did you guys navigate through those comments?
I think that's where the dark humor comes in. Where you get in the car and you just have to be like, that was so stupid. Like it might sound like insensitive if you haven't gone through it, but sometimes we just get in the car and be like, did you hear that guy? Like, that was so dumb.
My all-time favorite was being told that if I cut out coffee, that we would have children. And I was like, all I could say in the moment was, okay, thank you so much for that. Yep.
Sometimes you just have to laugh it off. And then sometimes there would be extra hurtful ones of just like, you have no idea. Like, kind of almost like, how dare you try to speak into this thing that you don't understand.
I think that along our journey, the comments that tended to be the most hurtful were ones, unfortunately, from our church at the time. People in our church, again, totally well-meaning comments and attempts at being encouraging and speaking life over us in the situation, not trying to fault anyone, but those were probably the hardest to reconcile with, because it unintentionally painted an odd picture of God, and a picture of God that did not at all reconcile with what we were navigating internally and within our relationship at the time. So those were definitely the hardest, but I feel like the best way that we were able to process that, beyond the dark humor and kind of laughing it off, were bringing those to people we trusted and almost letting them be the filter for us, an external filter, for them to say, yeah, we're going to say no to that. We're going to say no to that thought or that emotion. And we're just going to take it and move it over here. People in our lives that we trusted, who knew what we were going through, who were already kind of that listening space for us, they, along the way, were able to not just laugh it off with us, but also kind of speak the, no.
Yeah. Remind us of the truth of who God is in this situation and how he relates to us, and say, that's not how God operates. This is how he operates. And we're not going to come under this lie or come under this belief that you're being punished or there's some secret sin that needs to be unveiled, or,
whatever.
So many different possibilities. We're not going to operate under that. We know that God is in this way. Not, he doesn't look like that. He doesn't operate in this way.
Right. For sure.
You had a conversation with your mom, didn't you?
Yeah,
At one
so
point?
we found a book on infertility by Lois Flowers, and
It's right up there. We still have it.
yeah, and
Hold on a sec.
the last chapter of the book is a letter that you could copy out and give to people that talks about like there's a note to pastors, there's Appendix A, when someone you love is infertile, and it gives helpful tips of like, I don't want to hear medical advice and fertility folklore. I don't want pat spiritual answers. I don't want anecdotes about other people. I don't want negative comments about pregnancy, childbirth, and parenthood. And under each section, it Lois, Mrs. Flowers, goes through and just explains in really nice words why that might feel hurtful or why that might not be a way to comfort somebody that you love that is going through infertility. And for the people in our lives that we were close to, like my family, parents, the couples that were in our Bible study, when I had mentioned, oh, this book that I'm reading has this, it was like across the board. They said, I would love to read that. Mm-hmm. Could you make a copy of that so that I can learn the best way that I can help you through this, or how to be a good friend to you through this? Because for a lot of our friends and family, we also were the first people who had gone through infertility. And so at no fault of their own, they just didn't know how to handle it. And they were well-meaning, but we found a way to like also help educate them of like, this is what you could do that would feel helpful to us. So this is how you can give us grace. This is how you can be a good friend. And I felt like that was a really tangible way to help with that. People in our lives were incredibly supportive. They just needed a little help telling us like what would be helpful to hear. It's still speaking truth to us for sure, but in a way that was kind. And of course we would get one-off comments about like, are you eating pineapple core? We're big runners. So apparently Chris was running too much. And that was
wow.
So we had all of that too.
People who run have kids all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to track.
Yeah. Just
yeah,
stop running and then, you know.
I think something it's tricky. I think this is maybe a kind of a unique curse among well-meaning Christians in their 20s. They think their job is to be wise and to say stuff. And like, you know, sometimes I just want a friend who will feel dumb with me and listen. Yeah. Like, I don't actually need you to come up. I know you're feeling awkward. I can see it in your body that like you just want to leave this conversation and you feel like you need to give me a little nugget. Like, a lot of our friends who, you know, we were around while we were going through this, I have to remember they were also young. Like we're all idiots when we're like figuring all that stuff out for the first time. And it helped me to go into interactions sometimes expecting there to be well-meaning but hurtful comments, so that when there wasn't anything, I could go, oh, what a relief. It was actually great, you know?
Yeah. Would you mind sharing the name of that book again? That could be a really awesome resource.
It's called Infertility, Finding God's Peace in the Journey by Lois Flowers. It looks really dumb.
Hey, that's okay.
But it's a good one. Truly. This is the best one that I've ever read on infertility.
Yeah, it's pretty authentic. I read it on a solitude day, and threw it as far as I could across the woods at one point, because it just hit parts of me that I wasn't paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's got flowers on the cover, but it's a good book.
Well, thank you for
Noted.
sharing. That could
Yeah,
be
you're
a really good resource, and I like how it breaks it down into like different emotions and what I do want to hear and don't. I think that's really
really
awesome.
helpful.
Yeah. So now a little bit of advice that you guys would give. So Carrie and Megan, what are some ways that you would say wives can support their husbands throughout this male factor infertility journey?
I think just, I know it sounds almost too simplistic and kind of like, duh, but just affirming them, affirm what a good man he is, affirm what a good husband he is, and affirm in him the desire that you see, the desire for him to give you what you want, what you've dreamt of. Just affirm, like, I know that you wish this could be changed. I know that you wish things were different, and I'm with you in this. Like, I will sit with you in whatever you're feeling. Be willing to sit in it. And know that your feelings about the whole situation are probably going to look different, and become okay with that. Become okay with that. Your expression of those feelings will be different. And some of that is a gendered thing, and some of that is just like, he has the diagnosis and I don't. And so go into conversations with an understanding that you won't understand everything, but just be willing to sit in that with him. And maybe not everyone would agree with this, but it was really important for us. I kind of touched on it earlier. We did not go to an appointment until we were both ready to do that. And there were a lot of times where I was ready to get stuff done and get these tests done and get this appointment done and cross things off the list, but he wasn't ready. And at the end of the day, I had to respect that because it is his diagnosis. And this was before. I'm also speaking about this from before we knew, like, it is not going to happen. Like, we still had hope of maybe we could do ICSI, IVF, something. And so I was just, let's do whatever we can to get there. But it was him that was going to have to take the medicine, take the shots, try this procedure, try that procedure. And I just felt really strongly like, we're not going to move forward until we're both ready to do this. And then once we got through Snowflakes and we're doing the transfers and all that, that was more on my body. Like you talked about, Carrie, like that was more, that part is on us, is all the medications, all the transfers, like that really, we bear the weight of that. And so that was kind of more up to me. He kind of let me take the reins of like, okay, are you ready to, do another transfer? Are you ready to, do this test and that test and whatever? But pre that, I felt really strongly the best way I could support him is try my best to be on the same page with him as far as timeline and what he was ready to confront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you too about, like you were saying at the beginning about building him up. I felt like affirming his masculinity. And I remember there was a time that you were just feeling really sad that you had done this to our family, and looking at you and telling you that, like, I forgive you. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, it sucks. Like, it really sucks. And I'm going to agree with you on that. But like, I'm here. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. I love you. I forgive you. Let's move forward together. So not trying to brush it under the rug like it's okay, because it wasn't okay. Like, we weren't okay. It was hard. But just reminding him that, like, we're in this together. we're going to figure it out together and I'm not going anywhere. I think another piece of that was checking in and allowing Chris and myself the freedom, checking in with each other. Just how are you feeling about it today? Even if today your answer is, I don't want to have kids at all. Like, I'm just mad about all of this and we're just going to live our best life with a dog. And that, if that was how you were feeling today, finding like the safety to be able to share that with me, and me not holding him to that. And the next day, maybe he's like, I want 5 kids and I want to get on this train right now and spend all the money that we have to make this dream come true, and holding space for those feelings too. And just feeling the safety to explore all of our options and the range of emotions that we were feeling, and being willing to sit in that space with you.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that both of you had some really great advice. So thank you for sharing that. So the last question I have is, what advice would you give to other couples that are experiencing male factor infertility?
So I have one that's sort of spiritual, emotional, and then one that's terribly practical, but really important. I'm going to do the terribly practical, really important one first.
Okay.
Especially if you have joint health insurance through the man's job, ask about your insurance coverage and find out what is covered, what could be covered if there was a diagnosis, what procedures, like figure that stuff out. It is not the same world that it was 10 years ago. More and more of this stuff is being covered. But if we don't know to ask, we don't know to share that with our providers. Like, some of this stuff can be covered and it doesn't have to be out of pocket.
Yeah. Girl, advocate for yourself. If your company has an adoption policy, you advocate that embryo adoption needs to be added and considered as a coverage. Because I'll tell you what, I did not stop rattling the cage. And now I work at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and now they cover it under their adoption insurance policy. And it took 3 years of not letting it go, and now they cover it.
Carrie made a binder. Like, she printed off
Yeah.
emails that didn't get responded to.
Yeah, don't mess with me. And so now, like, we didn't get to benefit from that, but I know that there are other people at the hospital that are going through the embryo adoption process that are now benefiting from, like, doing some advocacy work and asking for help. So that's some advice.
Yeah, so that's the terribly practical, really important one. The second one, of course, is also important. Just pay attention when there's joy and peace. If there's something that is joyful, savor it. Just give yourself to it. Enjoy it. When the light breaks through the clouds and there's that moment, just assume it's a gift. Assume it's grace. Just take it and enjoy it. You don't have to feel bad for enjoying something good. Peace is a big reason that we ended up going forward with Snowflakes. We felt like a lot of the other options we were looking at, either a door was slamming in our face, like no ICSI, no IVF, like, just we're not even going to try. Or there were just things about going forward that for either one of us did not feel peaceful, did not feel like this isn't the right time or this isn't the right way or whatever. Be honest about if something feels not peaceful to you. Megan, Ricky, I like that you both checked in with each other about, like, does this feel right? There's another way of saying, do you have peace about this? I do think peace is, if you're a Christian person, I think peace is one of the ways that God helps clear a path forward. It goes like, look, there's firm ground here. There isn't chaos here. Like, just take a step and look for more peace, you know? That's all I'd say.
Yeah, follow peace was a big motto for us through it all, through the big decisions and through the smaller ones. Like, we always tried to follow peace. And another piece of advice I would say is invest in your marriage and your relationship, because it will test every part of it. But I believe we are better parents because of the work that we did between us, and not just through the embryo adoption process, but through the last almost 11 years of our marriage. Like, we did the best we could to make those years count. We didn't travel a lot because all our money went to all this stuff, but we invested relationally, and we went to counseling. We went on date nights. We did so much together. Like, we are best friends. We do everything together. We are always together. And I think because we are so solid, and we went into finally having our son with such a strong foundation, then parenthood tests everything in you too. Your whole dynamic shifts. But because we were so intentional about investing in our marriage, even despite the heartache we were going through, it's helping us like survive, and not just survive, but thrive, you know, through this season of being new parents. Is very difficult and exhausting and draining, but we're getting through it because we have such a strong foundation, and we used this struggle as an opportunity to grow closer and to beat the challenges that tried to test us and potentially, you know, make us grow apart. But we said, no, we're gonna just really lock in together here.
I would add to learn the art of protecting your time and your space without being isolated, because along the journey there will be, you know, ups and downs, and moments of joy and peace, and moments of sadness and grief. It's all mixed up together, and your time and space, both individually but also as a couple, is very, very important. And it's finding the balance between learning to say, no, I'm so sorry, we can't make it to that event tonight, or we can't make it to that party, or that work thing, whatever, because, you know, we need some time, you know, tonight, or whatever reason you would give. But learning the art of curating time and space for healthy solitude is important, without it turning into isolation. And it's tricky. It's a journey to learn that. But if you're able to find that balance that works, yeah, it just creates a naturally healthy opportunity for that intimacy, that safety, and progress ultimately, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, there were nights where, you know, maybe we had a not so good appointment that week, and we had an opportunity to go hang out here with these people or go to this event. And sometimes we would say, you know what, that would be really good for us to just go out and be with people and just like not think about it. And then there were some nights where we were like, no, we just need to stay home and just have a chill night and watch a movie or something. And it would be different each time. You know, you just kind of have to tune in and be sensitive to what each of you needs in that moment.
Yeah. Well, that is such great advice. Thank you guys so much for sharing, and thank you so much again for being willing to be on this call, for being willing to discuss this. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing how you're going through your journey and navigating it. And I'm just so excited that both of you were able to have such sweet, precious sons that you've added to your family. And yeah, just thank you guys again. I really appreciate it. And I know that this will be very beneficial to a lot of other couples. So, but it was so nice to meet you guys face to face, if you will. And yeah, just thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carly. And thank you, Chris and Carrie. Yeah. It was great to meet you guys.
Yeah.
You too.
You too.
Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.